Hi, and welcome
Hi.
back to Behaviour Sleuths. Hi, Monica.
Hi, Sala. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. So, today and over the next couple of episodes, we're going to be talking about, I guess it's almost like a taboo subject because we don't talk about it a lot, but pet loss. So, what happens when you lose an animal that you've been caring for? Um, what are some stories that people have to share about what that experience was like, including myself? And also, what are some ways to transition, to move through that loss and to come out on the other side, not forgetting or minimizing the relationship that you had, but just kind of honoring it and being able to think about it without pain, I think would be kind of the goal. And today we're going to kick off with Monica just sharing some thoughts and ideas around why this relationship is important and why the loss of the relationship is important. So, Monica, should I hand over to you?
Sure. So I think when people haven't had a pet or they haven't been around animals, they get confused. Like, it's just a dog, it's just a cat, get another one. But after, having my own pet, speaking to you, doing the research, it's actually that humans, like domesticated animals like dogs and cats, are similar to human attachment, especially, right, some people who consider themselves pet parents because they spend time with the routines, taking them to parks, they spend weekends with them. So there's just as much investment financially, emotionally, training, holidays. And some people can't or chose not to have children. And so this is how they can nurture a living thing. So animals protect their owner and owners protect their animals. And so it's very reciprocal, this attachment. So Sala, you recently went through something. I don't know if you had something to say about the research or if...
Yeah, I guess I was just going to say, I think there's a lot of corollaries. So animals are not children. Just say that. However, there are many aspects to that relationship because of the dependence, because animals don't have a voice, don't have choices, and in a lot of countries don't have any rights, that you're in loco parentis. So you are making medical decisions. You're making decisions about from, the basics, like what will you eat, when will you go outside, where will you sit? All of those decisions are being made by the human, typically, although I do know a lot of dogs that have quite a strong voice in that decision. But you essentially have oversight over everything. And particularly when you get to end of life, there is no input from the animal about what's going to happen. It's the human who's making those decisions, sometimes in consultation with a vet, but, vets will say, I can't make the choice for you. You have to make the choices. And what's really hard, I think, is that that trust and interdependence that's been built up. Now, 100% of the decision making is on you as the human in the relationship. And I think that is really, that kind of brings home how vulnerable animals are to how we care for them. And so I think that makes it even harder to deal with those kind of decisions. So I was lucky enough to adopt two puppies back in 2007, Fred and Ginger, when they were 5 months old, and definitely spent the first 2 months stressing out about could I keep them alive, because even though I'd had dogs as a child, I'd never been the responsible person for them. I just played with them and walked them. And so having to try and figure out how much puppies need to eat and when they need to go outside and all of that stuff was a lot. And last year, so they turned 14 in March of 2021. Ginger, who'd been diagnosed with liver cancer but had really had no symptoms at all, had a fall. We went in, and after an ultrasound, the vet said, look, the tumors that we found the first time are now significantly bigger. We can't see a lot of the other organs. you're very close to the end now. She's got maybe a week, she's got maybe 4 weeks, but it's no longer than that. So that was devastating because she's always been so healthy. And I knew she had this diagnosis, but because she was well and seemed to be responding to her traditional Chinese medicine and her liver support, it kind of seemed like she was going to be okay. And her brother has had significant health issues for years, although all managed with medication. So it was hard to think of or to accept the fact that she was going to go first. And so I was able to take time off and reschedule almost everything and just be home with her. And for the first 3 weeks, she was okay. I mean, she wasn't great at night, so she was definitely not comfortable, although we were trying to manage the pain. So we just slept on the sofas, although obviously she slept on the big sofa. I slept on the one that's just slightly too short for me, because that's the way she liked it. And just would get up in the night with her to either take her down or to just make sure she didn't fall, because she was a bit less stable. And then at the end, she just fell over, shaking her head, lost her balance and really whacked her leg. And the vet came and he just said, the leg will probably be fine in a week. But we're now at week 5 of this 1 to 4 week time period that they'd given me. And he said, apart from her leg, she's feeling okay. But in a week's time, you don't know. She had a really bad day the week before when she hadn't drunk anything for 24 hours. And I honestly thought, this is it. We need to get the vet in. The next morning, she kind of woke up and started drinking again, started eating again. So I was like, okay, so we've got a few more days. But then the fall happened. And I just thought, I don't want her last week to be her experiencing me having to carry her to get to water, to get downstairs, which is what was happening, because she hated it. She hated being carried. She's a very independent girl. And so I just decided it was time to let her go. So it was, insofar as these things can be peaceful, I guess it was. She was on her sofa in her favorite place. Fred was there. We all said goodbye. And, she went to sleep at home and it was very calm. And then we had to look after Fred. So he wasn't okay about losing his sister. She had been there to protect him and clean his paws every time he came back from a walk since he was a puppy, as well. So that was a real struggle. I think watching Fred try and cope with losing his sister was really hard because I'd made the decision to have him there because I thought he would then understand why she wasn't around. He would understand that she had gone, but I mean, he's never seen anyone die. So I don't think he really understood that she wasn't just asleep and hadn't gone out and was coming back. So he spent about 2 months just walking around the flat, crying, waking up in the middle of the night, looking for her. It was really difficult. And so all we could really do was kind of comfort him. And then we were kind of dealing with his physical and mental issues. So Fred had some dementia. His eyesight was not good. His hearing was not good. His mobility started really going downhill. And we started working with a physio. So he became more stable, but he needed help to get up at the end. I mean, the last 2 weeks, he needed help to sit down. He didn't have the strength to lower himself. And he was 30 kilos. So he was a big boy. And it was I just thought, I don't know how much longer we can physically support you. And so unlike Ginger, and not in a way I would have wanted. But he slid off the bed during the night, and when I went to get him up, he fell over again, and then literally started almost losing consciousness in almost straight away. And so it was the middle of the night, and I was like, we need to take him to the hospital right now, because this is not okay. So we managed to get him there, and when we got there, they took him away, and we could hear him crying, because he hated being at the hospital, obviously. But when the vet came out, she said, look, we've done an ultrasound and his abdomen is full of blood. She said, we don't exactly know why, but we think he may have had some tumors that weren't diagnosed and they've burst. And so there are very few options. I mean, by that stage, Fred was 14 years, 9 months old. And she said we could do surgery, but it's 30% chance of success. And I just thought, I can't do that to him. I can't put him through surgery to maybe give him a couple of weeks. I mean, it just, so we had to decide. So I had to decide to say goodbye to Fred. And that was really hard, because it was really different to Ginger passing, because it was so traumatic. It was a shock for me, but it was very traumatic for him. It's not the place he wanted to be. It was very hard. And so I think accepting that has been very difficult, because I would never have wanted him to go through that experience. And particularly to have that be the last thing that happened for him. It wasn't okay. But yeah, so then that was just after Christmas. So he actually died 6 months and a day to when Ginger died. And having both of them leave so close to each other, I think was really, I mean, I kind of knew Fred wasn't going to be around forever, because he really had a lot of underlying health issues. But you can know something logically and yet not accept it emotionally. And so I think accepting it has been hard. And then getting used to experiencing what it's like to have a house that's silent, that doesn't have little feet walking around, doesn't have people lying around snoring, doing other stuff. It's been very difficult to get to a place of peace with that, because for almost 15 years, that was what it was like at home. There were at least 2 other people who had ideas about what should be happening that often didn't accord with what I wanted to do. But that was part of the fun of being at home, was having them here. So that's been really hard. So yeah, so trying to find ways, which I know we'll talk about in episode 3, but trying to find ways to process that and sort of find a way to honor them, and their memory has been really important. And I think what I didn't really appreciate is that when Ginger died, we still had to look after Fred. And so it wasn't a case of you can just give in to how you feel, because we had to keep it together for Fred. And I think I hadn't really appreciated that. And then when Fred left and then there was no one, it was like, oh, okay, you can really wallow, because you don't have to get up and walk anybody. You don't have to plan meals. You don't have to think about when's the medication happening. You just can wallow. And I think that makes it really, to lose the last animal, I think is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been the last 9 months.
So I noticed a few times you've called your dogs people, right? You
Yeah.
refer to them like people. And so this is, where we originally started the conversation is similar attachment. So people grieve people grieve animals, right? Because sometimes we see our animal like a person, a friend, a friend, a sibling, I know you said they're not children. I know what you mean, but I mean, people call their animals fur babies, So it's it's not like having a child, but it is like having a child.
Yeah, I think there are lots of aspects that are because of the level of dependence. They are like children.
Mm-hmm.
I just appreciate they're not humans. And I know that for some people that's a real, like for Pope Francis, for example, that's a real issue, is people being attached, people having these loving relationships with animals doesn't for them feel necessary or appropriate. From my perspective, I feel like they were people, because I think having them from when they were babies and we had the awful teenage years, I remember those well. I got to see their whole life, and for apart from the first 4 months, to be completely responsible for how did that life look. And they had a lot of personality. I mean, I think that's the thing that, when you were saying some people haven't experienced living with animals, and often people would meet them and they'd be like, oh, but they're from the same litter, they've had exactly the same lives, and they're completely different personalities.
Yes, they're completely different.
I didn't know dogs were like that. And I'm like, of course they're like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like us. Some dogs will be calm. Some dogs, like Ginger, are reactive. Some dogs are laid back, like Fred. And it's just, and that's also the thing, because they're not just furry toys that move. They have their own thoughts, their own preferences, their own likes and dislikes. And that's part of the joy of having dogs, is getting to experience what they're like. But it also makes you miss them more, because it's not like, they're just a furry body that moves. They're really not. There's a lot of there's personality and a real for me they are people, but I appreciate that's not the same for everyone.
And domesticated animals watch their owners. They watch, like dogs will watch, okay, she's getting her shoes, we're gonna go for a walk, or she looks sad, maybe I need to go comfort her, or it's bath time, especially with my dogs.
Yes. I need to get out of there.
She's getting the towel, so I've got to run. So
someone is heading into the kitchen too. Yes, someone's heading into the kitchen. This could be good for me.
Yes. So they really read their owners.
Yeah.
And so in what ways do you feel like Ginger and Fred also gave back to you, enriched your life?
Oh, I can't. I mean,
that's a tough one.
It's so when I got them, it was 2007, which is a long time ago, but it was a difficult year at work. When I decided to get them, I didn't quite realize how difficult it was going to be. And so they came in summer. So they would have come in March, April, May, June. So they came in July of 2007. And by September, really bad things were happening in my workplace, mostly to me. And I think if I hadn't had the dogs, I don't know what that would have meant for my mental health, because literally I would close the door, and from the time I got back in the house, the whole discussion was who peed where, who pooed where, who's eaten today, what did they, it was all about them and their day. And it was fantastic, because it meant I couldn't sit there thinking, I can't believe this just happened, or that person did this, or they said that. There wasn't space. So that, I mean, I really credit them with getting me through what was a really difficult year at work, and saving my mental health. And because it was just like, okay, well, I've got to go and have a walk because they have to have a walk. And we've got to have regular bedtimes because they need regular bedtime. So it was just, yeah. And actually, I mean, I think the whole time they were here, that was their gift. Yeah, okay, there's stuff happening at work or outside, but we need to be fed, we need to be walked, we need to go to sleep. And that helps to give you structure, because I think, when you're in, emotional or psychological pain, a lot of those things go away. You don't have structure, because why have structure when everything's falling apart? But dogs don't let you. They don't care that stuff is blowing up at work. They don't care. They just want to go for their walk. They want to have their dinner. They want to go to bed on time. And I think I was watching, which I know we've spoken about, Ricky Gervais, his show Afterlife. He talks about the loss of his wife, and then the only reason he doesn't commit suicide that day is because the dog needs to be fed.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a punchline, but it's also kind of very true.
Yeah.
That having someone rely on you means, well, I can't just sink into oblivion with this. I have to at least keep this level of functioning. And I think, so I think that's definitely something that they gave me. But I think dogs just have a lot to teach us about, I think, all animals, but about being present. There's nothing as fun as going for a walk with a dog outside, because, and sometimes people would say, oh, I can come for a walk with you guys. And I would be like, oh, it's okay, because I know they want to talk. And actually what I really loved was just being outside with the dogs. None of us are talking, but we're all moving as like a team, and they're sniffing stuff and interacting with other things. That was just joyful, I think. I mean, I know people who credit their dogs with their physical health because of getting them outside and making them move. I think they have a lot to teach us. And particularly, I think if you have two, then you actually also learn a lot about interaction. So I think, dogs have a lot to teach us about how do we disagree, how do we forgive, how do we move on from that, because they do it instantaneously. I mean, one time Ginger tried to bite another dog and Fred got in the way. She ended up nicking his ear, which just bled like a geyser. But he forgave her straight away. There wasn't any awkwardness. She was very remorseful, but he was like, okay, you bit me, we've moved on. That's what I mean. They're kind of unbelievable. So I think they have a lot of lessons to teach if you want to learn.
Yeah. And so one thing, is that unconditional acceptance. So they don't care you had a bad day at work, but they might want to comfort you if they can sense you're feeling sad. But they don't care what you're wearing. They don't care what your education is. They don't care how much money you have, as long as they're fed.
Yeah.
Right? They don't care if you're popular or famous. They just love you for you. It's unconditional. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really, they have a lot of gifts. Yeah.
So if this isn't too painful of a question, you can always plead the fifth. What was it like? What did your grief feel like? Because grief, whether it's for a pet or for a person, can be so heavy and confusing. Some people will describe it like, I felt like I was losing my mind.
Yeah, I didn't really feel like that, but I did. There's definitely a difference, I think, and I hadn't really understood that until Fred passed, with having to keep going. So when Ginger passed, I thought that was really bad. And definitely, I would say about a good 2 months, all anyone had to do was say something kind to me, and I would burst into tears, because everything is very raw. And I would be in the taxi going to work, which was the only place I felt, where I had privacy. So I apologized to all of the taxi drivers I had during that period, well, mostly last year, really. And I would see a dog on the street or just be looking out the window thinking, and I would find myself crying about Ginger, because I couldn't cry at home because Fred was still here, and I didn't want him to be impacted by me being upset. I wanted to just focus on him being okay, or as okay as we could make him. But then when Fred died, and there was no one to kind of hold it together for, and now the house just seemed like it was dead, it just, I felt, I mean, I don't know, but it just felt like this yawning chasm of emptiness.
Yeah.
I think is the best way to describe it. It's like a bruise that aches, but it's just constantly under pressure. So it's kind of, for me, it felt like a physical weight on my chest, stopping me from breathing. But it was constant. So I'd say about 3 weeks after Fred died, I went back to work, which was kind of as planned. It wasn't, because I'd taken time off for Christmas. And even though I was doing stuff and doing emails and seeing clients, it just felt like the whole time there's this weight on me. And then talking to people about what had happened was the same. And then these friends of mine are fostering a dog, and they've never looked after a dog before. And so they were very worried about doing the right thing, making sure that she's okay. And so I went over to help them, just because, I'm used to looking after dogs now. And that was so helpful because it took me out of myself. It meant I had to think about, how do I do the best for my friends? How do I do the best for this dog? How can I help them to be able to get on a good path? And I found that to be unbelievably helpful. It's because my friend was like, I'm really sorry to ask you, because it was only 2 weeks after Fred had died. She said, she said, we don't know what to do. We're kind of a bit, and I understand the reticence, but actually helping them was really healing for me, because, it's almost like all of those lessons I learned from friend Ginger, I could then use and help them to do a great job with the dog they're fostering. So that really helped. I think helped a lot.
Okay, thanks for answering these really hard questions.
That's okay, I've got questions.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing is the bond you had with your dogs, the attachment, and the grief. So would you have any advice for those who lost a pet, or those who would like to comfort someone who lost a pet?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess what I would say is, I'm sure everybody is different. And so I think understanding what you need is really important. I think things that helped me were ignoring unhelpful comments. So whilst the majority of the people that I am close to either have animals or respect the relationship that I had with friend Ginger, some people, even people I know who care, said really callous or crass things, which were not helpful. And so I chose to ignore them and not engage with them, because that could have led to a big fight. But I just was like, fine, I'm going to shut down this conversation because you don't get it. You're not saying anything that I'm finding helpful. And I decided not to feel bad about that, not to feel bad about shutting down people when I thought they were saying things that really weren't making me feel better. So I think that was definitely one thing. I think also just giving yourself some space, because depending on what you do during your day for work, if on any level you're having to give to other people, it's a time of very low capacity for you. So limiting how much you're doing, I think, is really important, because it's just, you're not in a place where you're really at normal capacity. And so if you're actually having to give energy to others, you're not really going to be able to do it. And I think it's very difficult for you, because, you know, definitely people were saying things to me and I was just like, I don't care. I really don't care what you're talking about. I'm dealing with something right now. So I think giving yourself space is good. And then finding ways to, I mean, there were some brainless things that I did that I think really helped just to get me through some hours. So I'd never watched The Good Place, and I just binge watched it that first weekend. I watched 4 seasons in like 4 days, which is not a normal thing to do.
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
All I could, yeah, but I was kind of numb, and all I needed something that was just light enough to not make me have to engage, but interesting enough to make me engage. It was the perfect balance for me. It was perfect balance. No, it won't work for everyone. But I think there are some things like The Good Place, like Afterlife, which are really, when you're in the right place, can be really helpful to feel like you're not alone. Yeah. What you're experiencing is universal. I think that helps. And also finding ways to memorialize them in a way that feels appropriate to you. So I love painting. And so I painted Ginger after she passed. And I've just done my first friend painting. But a friend of mine sent a locket, like an old-fashioned locket, which you open up, because she said, I thought you might want to put pictures of them in there. So I painted these tiny little, not very representative, but these tiny little pictures of them. That's a really nice thing as well. So their birthday is coming up on the 4th of March. And I'm going to be making one of those for my helper Anna, who was there from when they were 6 months old, and I know really, really misses them. So actually helping other people remember them is another thing that I think is helpful for me to do that. So I think there's lots of different ways, and I know episode 3 we're going to talk about even more ways, but I think it can feel very lonely. And if you are in a place where you don't have people who understand why you're upset, I can't imagine how hard that would be, but there are ways to help yourself, I think.
Yeah, so you bring up some good points, right? I know people struggle with grief in general, feeling comfortable around someone grieving. And so sometimes it's just listening, right? Because I can't physically take away your grief. So maybe the best thing I can do is just sit with you, spend time with you, listen. People often avoid questions about the person or the dog or the cat or the animal that passed, but sometimes that's helpful, right?
Yeah, asking actually questions. It reminds me of there's a really amazing interview between Anderson Cooper and Stephen Colbert, and it's available on YouTube. I will find the link. But essentially, they both lost their dads when they were young, and Anderson Cooper lost his brother. Stephen Colbert lost 2 brothers, and they talk about grief and what it's like to experience that. And because Anderson Cooper's mother had just died, I think, a couple of months before they did this interview, and he said the same thing. He said, I know people are avoiding speaking about her because they don't want to upset me. And he said, I love it when they speak about her because I think about her every day, and it means that they're also remembering her. And so that was very hard for him to say. But then Stephen Colbert said it's the same for him. He loves it when people talk about his dad and his brothers, because even though this happened a long time ago, he thinks about them every day. And so, yes, he might, particularly for Anderson Cooper because it was so recent, but you might cry, but actually you're doing it anyway. You're thinking about them every day. So to have other people acknowledge them is actually really, it's nice.
Yeah, and it's people get uncomfortable with tears and
Yes.
feelings, but
yeah,
you can't. It's just I can't take away your tears, but I can, I guess, create a space, right? So grief can feel confusing. You can feel like your mind is slowing down. You can feel lonely, like no one gets it, right? And so sometimes it's just as simple as spending time asking questions. And crying is a detox, right? All the cortisol's coming out. Don't have to hold it. Sometimes it's nice to just cry with someone, laugh with someone. And yes, so we'll see in episode 2 when we invite Vivian and she talks about her cat and she'd like to share some of her the way she coped, right? Like making a video, and she likes to share funny stories. So
no, I think that's so true because it's their passing is one element of their entire life, and if that's all you focus on, it can get it's almost like you're negating all of the silly things that happened, or the funny things, or the dreadful things that they did during their lives. And that's actually the whole story. Because I had a friend who I don't think would describe himself as sensitive, but when I spoke to him just after Fred died, he said, I don't know if this is okay. And I think that's also another nice thing, is asking permission, is saying, is this okay with you to talk about it? He said, but can you tell me some of the funny stories that you remember about Fred? And that was really nice because he asked if it was okay, and it was totally fine. But also I was able to just talk to somebody who hadn't been there for some of these funny stories, but just kind of remember some of the things Fred did that made him so lovable. And it was just nice to connect with a happy memory of Fred.
Yeah.
So, I think that's also really good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Sala, do you think this is a good place for us to end? So, or is there anything you wanted to add?
No.
I mean, I don't mean to cut you off. It's just that we have so much to talk about in episode 2 and episode 3, and I want to save some things.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say is if you are experiencing this type of loss, or you are having to plan for it, because sometimes it's coming.
Yes.
It is really scary. And it is really hard.
Yeah.
But you can take some positives. And I think it's also just acknowledging if you don't have the loss, you would never have had all of the gains that you have from the relationship. And so even though this is really hard, I would never, I would go through this a million times to have had the experience of bringing them up. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that optimism, that positivity, the positive memories, and the love, you get to keep that. You get to keep their love. You get to keep those memories. And
yes, why even have their baby teeth?
Yours. So, yeah. And their baby teeth.
Yes, I mean, I don't know whose is whose, because I would just find them on the rug. But
oh, I see.
Well, this is from like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So you would just find them randomly. Oh, that hurt. Oh, it's a tooth. They lost their baby teeth. But it's just, it's having things that are special to you, I think, is really important.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry for all of the sniveling, but we will look forward to seeing you in episode 2, when we'll get to talk a little bit more about some other different experiences that people have had with loss.
But thank you, Sala. I mean, thank you so much. It's so vulnerable. Thank you for that.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you soon.
Bye.